Thank you, and welcome to the fourth CRIS lecture series of the semester. We're continuing to explore our theme of science as service, and it's my privilege to introduce our speaker for tonight. This evening we have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Aylenne MacLean, who has written, "While the love of chemistry is not listed as a spiritual gift, I do believe that my passion for science is from God." I love that. She's the founder of a nonprofit organization called Science with a Mission, or SMI, where science is used to help those in the developing world. In many places, people will never see the inside of a hospital or a clinic, and as a result, people often die from preventable diseases due to lack of a simple diagnosis. SMI is using immunoassays to create diagnostics for diseases like malaria, HIV, typhoid, and others. To date, Science with a Mission has sent more than 300,000 tests to 70 different countries around the world. Aylenne received her bachelor's degree in chemistry from Gordon College, then later went on to earn a PhD in bioanalytical chemistry from the University of Kentucky. Her research focused on improvement of sensitivity and detection limits for immunoassays. After working with Procter & Gamble Pharmaceuticals in New York for a couple of years, she returned to Massachusetts and worked for 6 years with Biogen. And in 2001, she founded Science with a Mission, and she now lives and works in Sharon, Massachusetts. So please join me in welcoming our guest, Dr. Aylenne MacLean.
Thanks. See, I want to make the camera people earn their pay tonight, so I'm going to use the mobile mic because I tend to wander. Here we go. Well, it's true. Technicalities. It's true, so I'm just going to admit it. I am not normal. I know you find it hard to believe, but it's true. You know, I was told that it's not normal for a little girl to want to be a scientist, but that's what I wanted even when I was young. It's not normal for a kid to actually become what they chose when they were a little kid. But as you heard, I grew up and I went to Gordon College, got a bachelor's degree in chemistry, and became a scientist. You know, living in Massachusetts, surrounded by Harvard, MIT, Boston University, Boston College, it's not normal to leave those great schools and go to Kentucky for graduate school. But I did that too. You see, they had a technology that was brand new at the time that I was fascinated with. They were using immunoassays, and I could see all the potential. You might be familiar with it if you've ever seen on TV the home pregnancy test. Now, the test hadn't been invented yet, but I could see the potential with this technology, so I went to this school. Now, after I started Science with a Mission, we decided that we would set the price for our diagnostics really low because we wanted people in the developing world, in the poorest places of the world, to be able to use these tests. So we actually set the price purposefully to not make money off the tests. We're just trying to cover the cost of the raw material. Some people are like, you know, that's not a real good idea. You know, that's not a good business plan. But that's what we did. And we keep most of our tests at $1 per test. Now, there's nobody that actually said it to my face, but I'm pretty sure that people that felt that when I quit my job in biotech to make the type of money I've made with Science with a Mission, for 6 years I lived below the US poverty line, people would say that's not normal. But I did that too. You know, there are scientific foundations that won't give to us because we're Christians. There are Christian foundations that won't give to us because we're doing science. So okay, I get it. I'm not normal. But you know what? I want to make one thing perfectly clear. You guys aren't all that normal either. Let's face it, many of you sitting here today are in the field of science. That's what your majors are. And yet you've come to a Christian university to get that degree. That's not normal to begin with. But now look at this. You're here at a seminar that says Science as Service. That's the topic for this seminar series. I love that topic, by the way. Okay, you have a friend that's sick, or you have a neighbor who's lost their job. You're moved by compassion, you want to help these people. Society says that's normal. They're your friends, they're people you like, that makes sense. But you're considering how you're going to use your science to help people out there, maybe people you don't even know. If you're considering using your science in the mission field, there are people that you haven't even met yet. People that might not look like you, might not even speak your language. You know what? Society's going to tell you that's not normal. So you and I, we're in this not so normal thing together. So what do you say tonight? We go ahead and we figure out what God can do when we take scientific knowledge and combine it with Christian compassion. I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago in 2013, the world witnessed a terrible typhoon. It was Typhoon Haiyan, strongest typhoon in history to strike land. It hit the Philippines and just devastated the region. Now I got to tell you, it took a few days before I had email contact again with friends, both Americans and Filipinos who serve in the Philippines. And I tried to find out with them how they're doing and what was happening. And for a while I was pretty confused because every email I was getting back, everybody down there from the Philippines referred to the storm as Typhoon Yolanda. Okay, that sounds nothing like Haiyan. And in fact, it's not a translation issue, completely different names. I learned why that happened. You see, in the Philippines, when they have a typhoon strike their land, they give it a name. Even if the international community ignores it, they give it a name if it strikes the Philippines. If it's a strong enough storm to be categorized as a typhoon, they give it a name. They start every year, beginning January, with the letter A for the first typhoon, and they work their way down. Do you get it? Yolanda. That was the 25th typhoon to hit the Philippines just that year. I tell you this so that you understand that typhoons happen frequently in the Philippines. Every year they get typhoons. Multiple times a year they get typhoons. Flooding is a huge issue for the clinics and the hospitals. We work with an organization called it's called Mercy in Action. They run a pregnancy center, and they're the only place in the entire region that offers free HIV screening for pregnant women. Now this is very important because women that are HIV positive, if they're not given anything, any medication, they will most likely pass that HIV virus on to their child. But now we've got a great new medicine that if you give it to them at several specific times during their pregnancy, they don't transmit the virus. So these people screen all pregnant women for free and get them the medicine if they're HIV positive. Wonderful. Well, in 2012, they had purchased some tests from us, and just a month later, typhoon came, flooding, washed our tests literally away. One of the nurses actually saw, because our tests were in Ziploc bags, saw them floating down there, and that was it. So we raised the money. Once they had somebody else traveling over to their region, we were able to replace all their tests for them. Now, they actually weren't hit terribly bad as others during this storm here, but they were affected by it. Now, I want you to understand, one of the advantages of the tests that we have is that they don't need electricity. So when you have a natural disaster, be it a typhoon in the Philippines or be it the earthquake that hit Haiti in 2010, our tests still work. Infrastructure can be destroyed, but our tests are still going to work. I just want to share with you one story with this. I'm missing all the photos. Oh well. What happened with this area that was hit so bad from Typhoon Haiyan, the group from Mercy in Action decided that, international people will probably be coming down to try and help, but they don't speak the language, they don't know what it's like to live in this environment, they aren't going to be able to put up with this as well as we can. They left their area that had been doing fairly well and still had electricity, moved to the islands that were badly hurt, set up temporary shelter to be able to start delivering babies, and eventually built then a solid structure for them 1 year later and started delivering babies there so they could keep going. Guinea is a small country in Western Africa. Walter wrote to me, he was going to be taking a trip to Guinea, and he proceeded to tell me that he didn't believe that our diagnostics worked. I'm sitting there wondering why this man is taking the time to write me an email to tell me he doesn't like our tests. Don't buy them, that's fine, but why are you writing? He said, no, I'm going to buy your tests. He said, I'm going to run them beside what's considered the gold standard for malaria testing, which is to do thick and thin stains, smears for microscopy. So you're taking microscope slides, preparing the slides with Gemsa stain, and you do these special stainings for them. He said, I'm going to run them side by side. I'm going to prove to you that your tests don't work. I said, this is wonderful. He bought the tests. He goes on. He wrote to me when he came back. He said, your tests agreed with the microscopy every single time. I'm amazed. I wrote back, I'm not amazed. I knew our tests worked. But what was really good, he shared a story that became possible because of using our tests. In the photo here, you see a little girl named Jenabu. She was brought into his clinic with a very high fever, and she had begun to have seizures. He suspected that she had malaria and that the malaria had turned into cerebral malaria. See, there are 4 different parasites that cause malaria, but there's just one of them that causes 90% of all the deaths. And that form sometimes can turn into cerebral malaria. If you survive, which most people will die if they get cerebral malaria, if you survive, you have brain damage. So this is what he suspected, where this girl had such a high fever and was already seizing. Now at this point, he'd already been using our tests long enough, he trusted our tests. So instead of taking the time to set up his microscope and to make thick and thin smears and films and look at them over the microscope for a while to start looking for parasites, he just went ahead and grabbed our tests, ran it, and within 15 minutes from when the lady first walked into the clinic with this child, he knew that she had this form of malaria, got her the medicine, and he says it's a miracle. Not only did Jenabu survive, but she survived neurologically intact. That means no brain damage, and he gives thanks to God for that. See, another advantage of our tests are that they're rapid. So where it can take a really long time to be able to tell if somebody has malaria, if you're using a microscope and you have to prepare these slides, you can do it within 15 minutes using our tests. James and Rachel are Assemblies of God missionaries who serve in Haiti. They've been there for 8 years now, and they enjoy it. Rachel is a nurse. She does a lot of work in the community, but she wrote to me just a little over a year ago telling me that she personally was giving such thanks to God for Science with a Mission, because recently she woke up and she just hurt all over. And she kind of jokingly said to her husband, hey, maybe I have malaria. But 3 hours later, when things were so much worse and she had such a high fever, she called for the nurse to come and to bring some Science with a Mission malaria tests. Sure enough, she had malaria, and not just any form. It's that deadly form we've talked about. But she had medicine there that had been left from the last short-term mission team that had been down to treat it. She treated herself, she got better, she was fine. And she said, I'm just spending the time praising God and praising Science with a Mission that we have these tests. She said, I've used them with other patients before, but boy, it really comes home when you're the one that's at risk of dying from this disease. See, another advantage of our tests are that they don't need refrigeration. Pretty important when much of the developing world doesn't have electricity, or at least doesn't have it on a consistent basis. The good thing with this is then you get a longer shelf life. Not only do you not need to refrigerate it, but from the time the uncut cards are made, we give it a 2-year expiration date. So that gives you a better chance of when you need it, it'll actually be there ready for you to use, as opposed to having something you'd have to be getting in on a weekly basis that was expiring very quickly in a short period of time. Darlene is the girl in green on the left-hand slide here. She is not a career missionary. She was just going on a short-term trip to Uganda. And she was amazed. She had never been on a mission trip before, and she was somewhat overwhelmed when she got there. She said the need was just so intense. Now, there's no electricity here, so we only worked while there was light. But she said there was a lineup of villagers to be seen by the doctors and nurses from sunup till sundown. It was just a constant stream. She said, so we just worked all day, and there was lots of things being done, and the gospel was shared with everybody that came to the clinic. It was a wonderful experience. She said, let me tell you a story that happened one night. She said, one night in the evening, we went to a crusade. That might sound a little strange here in the States. We don't have crusades in the States that I'm aware of anymore, but it's fairly common in Africa. They still have open-air crusades in the evenings. And so this woman went to this whole group of people, missionaries on the short-term trip. They went to this crusade, and they're out in this big field. Well, some people realized that these were the people from the clinic. So even though it was evening, they went over and they brought this boy, carrying him in their arms to him. They said, he has this high fever. Can you help him? Now, Darlene had her backpack with her, and she happened to have both Science with a Mission tests as well as medication in her backpack. She took her back off. They laid the boy down in the grass. It's just a finger prick with a single drop of blood. It's 5 microliters of blood that it takes to run our malaria test. Drop of blood, a drop of buffer. In a few minutes, she sees that he has malaria, gave him medicine right there. Of course, by the time she's writing to me, she was back home, so she was able to tell me he recovered completely, and that he just smiled nonstop after he got better because he was so happy that he was feeling good again. See, another advantage of our tests are that they're small and they're lightweight, so they can travel to remote rural areas. Heck, sometimes you even stick them in your pocket and you forget that they're there. You just have these small, lightweight things. You can pass this around and let people feel how small those are. And this is one of the big advantages of ours. Really, this is great, having something this small that can give you an answer, yes or no, whether somebody has a specific disease. Let me share a few more stories about where these tests can get to because of them being small and lightweight. Len Ramsey is a medical doctor who lives in Bozeman, Montana, but he spends several months a year over in Tanzania. See, he has a heart for the people in a certain region in Tanzania where they don't have good medical access. See, and there's a good reason for that, because there are no roads to this area. And in fact, it has enough trees that there's not even a wide enough area for them to build a landing strip to have an airplane be able to come in. So Len went ahead and trained himself, got his pilot's license, his helicopter pilot's license. So now, with his ministry that he started, Hope for the Nations, he flies a helicopter into this. Now imagine, if you're flying everything you need, all of your supplies and your people in a helicopter, weight's a big issue. Having lightweight tests are helpful in his ministry. Alan Barber is a dentist. His heart is for the Mayan Indians, and so he travels through several countries, but predominantly he's in Guatemala. And the way that he's going to get somewhere, it's not going to be with roads, and it's not going to be with a helicopter or a plane, but it's rivers. They have river access through a lot of different areas. What he does is he leads short-term mission trips, and he has a ship. It's about 37 feet long. The people will live on the ship for the most part. They get to a village, they get off, they do their mission work, they do their dental work, they do their medical work, they get back, they eat, they sleep on the ship, they go to the next village. And this actually shows that there are times when the water gets a little too shallow to be able to take the ship, and they just have to get off and walk to the village themselves. But with everything, if you've ever gone on board a boat, I mean, my uncle had a boat, tight, everything. I mean, even the way you sleep, you can't sit upright in your bunk. You know, everything is small and confined, and you make the best use of space. So having really small diagnostics are important for this ministry for them. Dan Wickman is a medical doctor who lives in Washington State, and he goes every year on his mission, with his vacation time, goes on a mission trip. And when I first got to know him, he used to go to a different country each time. I swear, he started off with Cameroon, then he'd go to another. The last several times, he's always gone back to Guinea. I think he's really got his heart set on Guinea nowadays. He sent me this photo of what he believes were the Yalunka tribe seeing a medical doctor for the first time ever. Wherever he goes, whichever country he goes to, Dan uses our diagnostics. I had never heard of a cloud forest until I received a request for tests to be used in a cloud forest. Picture a mountaintop, and then at the top of the mountain, you know, you've got the clouds. Sometimes you'll have fog, low, down, or things. You know, picture clouds being that low, just high, humidity, everything. And it's not just for a single day that this is what it's like. It's just always this way. There's a cloud forest. There's a cloud forest in Costa Rica. There's a cloud forest in Honduras. Evelyn lives in the cloud forest in Honduras. You see, in the country of Honduras, the people who live in the cloud forest are considered some of the lowest of the low. And so they don't have a lot of access to any of the things that other people have. So she wants to serve these people. So she now purchases our diagnostics to help them with their medical needs. Irene is the lady in the left here. The other two gentlemen are from Liberia. Irene is from Ghana. I met Irene in 2006 down in Alabama. I was at a place called Sifat. That stands for Servants in Faith and Technology. Great organization, started by a husband and wife that used to work as missionaries in the country of Bolivia. One of the things they do at Sifat is in the summertime, they pick a 10-week period, and they pick leaders from various countries in the developing world, and they bring them over for this full 10-week period of time to train them in everything under the sun that might be useful. How to use technology that might be available to them in their country that would be appropriate and could be helpful. The idea is if these people are already leaders and shown that they already care a great deal about their whole community, they'll go back and bring this knowledge to everybody else. So one of the things they'll do is they'll say, okay, if there's no doctor present, let's teach you how to deliver a baby. If you have a goat, I'm going to teach you how to milk it. I'm going to teach you how to make cheese. I'm going to teach you what you can do with this. If you have this part and this part and this part, let me show you how you can make a water pump. And they actually have about 5 different ways that they can make water pumps because that's such a useful thing to be able to use. And they'll figure out small things that they know, gee, you can often find this in a trash heap in the developing world. This is how you could use it. And they go through. Great way of using appropriate technology to do things. It's a great place too. They invited me to come down and speak to the group. Here I am, standing in the United States, but I'm able to talk to people from Burundi, Pakistan, India, Haiti, Guatemala, Philippines, just Mexico. You can go on. United Nations just under the roof here. So what I did is I talked to everybody about what was available, and I made everybody test themselves for malaria. So back to Irene. She was the only one there that was a nurse. She was the only medical person there. So she had told me about the dream that God gave her, that someday she was going to have a mobile medical unit. She hoped that she'd be able to own a van and be able to drive it out into the rural areas of Ghana because there was great need there. She said, if I had a van, I'd be able to get the medicine. And now with these diagnostics, I could take your diagnostics and I could go and I could help these people. That would be wonderful. I thought, wow, that'd be great, Irene. If you are ever able to make that happen, I will find a way to raise the money for your diagnostics. You won't have to pay for them. You just find a way, and contact me. I gotta admit, I really didn't expect it to happen. But sure enough, about 6 years later after I had met her, or 7 years, been a while, I got an email from somebody placing an order. Jim wanted to buy some diagnostics and he gave me the list of what it was that he wanted and he told me that I was gonna ship it to this lady, gave me her name. She's located in Kentucky. If you ship them to Kentucky, she'll bring them over to Ghana and they'll get used there. That's pretty much all he said. Now there's no reason for me to think back to Irene. I've had other orders in this meantime. We sell more than 40,000 tests a year at this point in time. And I'd had many other orders for Ghana for use with other organizations. But for some reason, I got Jim's email and I was like, I wonder if this is for Irene. Like, this has got to be the Holy Spirit working because there's no reason for me to think that. So I write back and I'm like, okay, by any chance, Jim, are these tests going to be used by a nurse in Ghana whose name is Irene, who was in Alabama back in 2006? He's like, yeah, how in the world would you know? I know Irene. So she doesn't own a van. She has to be able to borrow a van to get out and do this, but she's been able to do it several times. So we've been able to, 3 different times now, send her diagnostics for her to go on her mobile medical units out to the regions in Ghana. This is a picture sent to me from Nurses for the Nations. It's an organization that's ordered from us several different times. I received an urgent email from them one time. They said, look, we're heading over. We hadn't planned on this, but we just got word that there are 1,000 kids that we have a chance of getting out of slavery. I'm not sure how aware you are that slavery still exists. There's some in the US, but it's far more prevalent in a lot of other countries where people are taken, sometimes sold by their parents into this, sometimes taken and stolen away from neighborhoods or things, but they're enslaved. And so we're going to have a chance over in India to get 1,000 kids out of slavery and into an orphanage, but the law in India was such that they had to screen all those kids for HIV and malaria before they would be allowed into the orphanage. They said, look, we've got this opportunity, but we're leaving in 2 weeks. Wow, okay. I got to tell you, I have a great crew of volunteers. I sent out an email. I'm like, all right, guys, here's the opportunity we have. Here's what we need. Let me know when you might be available. Now, when I talk about volunteers, I'm not talking about able-bodied, healthy, energetic college kids. I'm talking people in their 80s. Energetic 80-year-olds. They're great. I tell people it's my job to keep the elderly people in my church off the streets. I keep them busy. They're a wonderful crew of volunteers that I have. And so they just started emailing me. I didn't even have to beg. They started emailing me their time slots, and we just set up a time slot, so we're going, as long as we could go and get things going. We got everything made, shipped, they got it, they brought them over, and they were able to get all those kids enrolled in that orphanage. See, one of the advantages of our tests are also that they're affordable. That makes them amenable to mass screenings. Really handy when you have something, say if you find a water source that's contaminated and you want to screen everybody that uses that water source for that disease. Man, if you've got a high price, it's one thing to pay up for one person, but when you're trying to take hundreds or thousands, you better have something that's both affordable and fast, and our tests can do both of those. This is Dr. Simpson Retnaraj. He's a medical missionary serving in Nepal. I met him in 2005, just out of Washington, D.C. We're both part of an organization called Christian Connections for International Health. Great organization. It's fun to go to their annual meetings and meet folks from around the world. Simpson told me about his work in Nepal. He works in the Himalayan mountains. And as you can imagine, just traveling and getting to a clinic there is really difficult. So people will often wait. They wait until they're so sick before they try to get to a clinic. They're often then dying before they ever get there because it's just so hard to get there. And Simpson thought, there's some diseases that you don't need to see a doctor for. You just need medicine, and you're going to get better. So he said, if we could just have a community health volunteer in different villages, a key person, that word spreads very quickly through villages, so it's easy to get the word out. If you have a high fever and you think you might have malaria, go to this person. If they can test you, you do have malaria, they'll have the medicine there to give you. That's great. So Simpson had to think, okay, who am I going to train in each village to do this? Because, it can't be somebody selfish. It can't be somebody that tries to, save the medicine just for their family or do something. They have to care about everybody in the community, the well-being of the whole community. Who's going to be the best at that? He came up with the idea that grandmothers would be the best. They would care the most. And I just get the biggest kick out of the fact that there are grandmothers in Nepal using my malaria tests. Well, Simpson was in the US a few years back. He has an organization out of Colorado that supports him, and they had flown him in. And so while he was in the US, he went ahead and called me. So we're talking on the phone. I said, I got to tell you, I get the biggest kick out of the fact that you've got grandmothers running my malaria tests. I said, and I go and I tell people when I talk, and I tell, he said, oh, if you like that story, let me tell you another one. Do you know what is a peon? And I was ready to say no, and then I'm like, oh, think of the accent. A peon. I'm like, yeah, I know what a peon is. He said, oh, so there's, let me go back, well, let me go ahead and do this. Another advantage of our tests are that they're easy to use. So you don't need to be a medical doctor to read the results. Anybody can be trained to do that. And that's what he said. He said, there's a village that I go to, and they just have one small little clinic where there's one doctor, one nurse, one lab technician who runs your tests, and one peon, low-level guy in the community. Don't know if there's some special needs there, but they just don't believe that he can be trained to do much of anything, so he cleans. That's all he does. He sweeps up, and he takes care of things that way. So, but the lab technician, I believe it's that she got married and moved away. I don't remember the story. I know she moved away from the village, and so all of a sudden they're left with just the doctor, the nurse, and the cleaning guy. And they didn't know what was going to happen because they didn't want the doctor to have to run the tests. He knows how to. It wouldn't be difficult. But if he's taking the time to run the tests, he's seeing fewer patients. And usually he's out straight seeing patients. You don't want to do that. You want to have him see less people per day. Well, it would make sense then. You think, well, let's have the nurse do it. But really the nurse served primarily as a midwife. She was out in the community, in people's homes, delivering babies most of the time. She wasn't even in the clinic most days. So that wouldn't be helpful. Simpson said, don't worry about it. These tests are so easy to run, I can train this peon how to run them. And he did. And so not only is this clinic able to keep up with almost the same level of what they were able to do for how many patients they see per day and everything going, but the nice added benefit is it raised the standing of this poor gentleman that everybody called a peon within the village, because now they saw this incredible service he was able to perform at the clinic nearby. Here's two of our tests. Up on the top you can see, hopefully, maybe not, there's one line. Every time you run our test, you should see one line, the control line. You should see that, you get that, that means the test worked properly, you can trust the results. If you have only one line, you do not have the disease that you're testing for. On the bottom, you might be able to see that there are two lines. That means the test worked properly, you can trust the results, and your patient does have the disease you're testing for. If you can see the difference between 1 and 2, congratulations, you can run our tests. Here's a list of the different tests that we have available now. And this is really in large part due to our partnership now with a company called Azog. They're a for-profit company that runs out of New Jersey. They're registered with the FDA, ISO 9000 compliant. They really came into being because they were trying to do a lot of drugs of abuse testing, pregnancy tests, things like that for the US market. Their president is originally from Nigeria. And when he learned what I was doing as an American trying to help people in the developing world, like Africa, he felt guilty. A little guilt can be good sometimes. He called up and he said, okay, how can we work together to save more lives? I said, great. Everything I've been doing by hand with making these tests, he had machines to do. I'm like, how about you do this part, you make it to this intermediate stage called the uncut card, sell them to me at a good price, and then I'll be able to use volunteers, there's my elderly folks, to do the final cutting and packaging and assembly work, and we'll get them out to more people, save more people. And so we've been doing this now for years. Since 2008, we've been working together. HIV/AIDS is a huge problem in the world today. And in large part, not entirely, but in large part, the church did very little. And I get it. I understand. Because here's what happened. I don't know if you've ever heard of the ABCs of AIDS, but what it was A, abstain, don't have sexual intercourse. B, be faithful. If you're going to be sexually active, have one partner, be faithful to that one partner. C, condoms. If you're going to be having sex, use condoms. What happened is the community at large all said, you can't go telling people not to have sex. People are going to have sex. You can't tell them to only be having sex with one person. No, they're going to be promiscuous. Condoms. This is how you're going to solve AIDS. Hand out condoms. If you want to be involved in helping stop AIDS, hand out condoms. Be a part of making condoms more available. Spread them out. And the church said, no, thank you. But what happened is, as they continued to watch the toll that this disease was taking on children that God dearly loves, the church had to start asking itself, okay, what can we do? We've got to do something. We can't let this just continue and stand by. And so they came up with the idea, some folks, that letting people know their status, helping them get tested. There's something going on now, thanks in large part to PEPFAR, which is something started by President Bush. Many people in the developing world now have access to the HIV drugs, the antiretrovirals, if they test positive. They get them free of charge for the most part. But it costs a lot of money to get diagnosed. They have to go to a government clinic to get diagnosed, but then they'll get the medicine for free if they're positive. So they said, what if, sometimes if you're really poor, that cost of getting the diagnosis, it's insurmountable. So I said, if we can hold to something that would be confidential and let people learn what their status is, this is how we can help people out, because then they'll be able to do it. And there's other things that we can do too to help out, especially if we partnered and did this through churches. So I want to share with you a story of what I consider to be just the Holy Spirit at work, telling a couple of different people on different continents different things to do until it comes together for something really neat. It starts off with me wanting to go to a conference. People don't know that Science with a Mission exists. I've got to go to a conference and just tell people that this exists, and I'll go to Ohio and go to a missionary conference. So I go down there. And you know what? Most missionaries are not doing medical work. So most people there really couldn't care less that I was doing this work with Science with a Mission. I was in their little exhibit hall and people would walk by and be nice to me, but it wasn't applicable to the vast majority of the people at this conference. But I had a very nice time because I spent a lot of time talking to the people that were beside me at the exhibit hall. They were from a Christian printing company down in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was fun talking with Bob and Sue and Katie. Well, Bob said to me, hey, I'd love to have you talk to my adult Sunday school class. So if you're ever in Louisville, Kentucky, come, let me know ahead of time. I'm going to have you talk to my class. I said, thanks very much, Bob. That's very nice. But I'm thinking, I don't think I'm ever going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, but okay. And Sue says, well, if you're going to be in Louisville, Kentucky, you can stay with me. My son is older. He's moved out. I have an empty bedroom. You don't have to stay in a hotel. That's great. Thank you, Sue. If I come to Louisville, Kentucky, I will stay with you. Several months later, I learned about a conference that would be great for me. It's not just a missionary conference where you have missionaries doing a wide variety of things with very few people doing scientific work or medical work. This is the Global Missions Health Conference. Yeah, missionaries and health together. That's all these people are going to be. I'm like, oh, this is where I need to be. Awesome. It's run by a megachurch in Louisville, Kentucky. How cool is that? All right. So I let Bob know that I'm coming to Louisville, Kentucky. And of course, this is his church. So this is where I'm going to be speaking on Sunday. After being at the conference Friday and Saturday, I will speak to his Sunday school class on Sunday morning. And I contact Sue, and she's good to her word. She puts me up, and we've stayed good friends. Even though she lives in Louisville, she went to UK like I did. So we talk basketball all the time. So we go. I speak at the Sunday school class, and I'm telling people about these diagnostics. And there's a woman in the Sunday school class who says, I'm leaving in a month. I'm going over to Kenya, and I'm going to work with this organization called Life in Abundance Ministries. And I have no idea if they do any medical work or if this is anything, but I'm going to let them know about these. I said, that's great. Thank you. Previously, with Life in Abundance Ministries, they're run by a woman named Florence. She and her group were getting together. It was near the end of the year, because this was November when the conference took place. They got together and they were praying about what they were supposed to do the following year. What would God have them do? And they felt called to start testing people for HIV. They didn't know how to do it. They didn't know where to get HIV diagnostics. They didn't know but they just felt strongly that God was telling them that this is what they were going to do in the next year. So they put it down. They wrote it down on a piece of paper that they were going to start HIV screening the next year. And here comes this girl calling them up saying, hey, I just learned about these tests. And here's the list of diseases that they have available. Are these of any interest to you? And Florence said, bring as many HIV tests as you can carry. And so this is how they did. And what they do is really neat. They will go out into an area, and first thing they're going to do is set up what church they're going to partnership with. Now, it may seem like a small thing here, but to try and get a church willing to have people that could be HIV positive even in their church is no small feat. So you find churches where they're going to be okay with this, and that they're going to be accepting and open and welcoming to these people. That's the first thing. Then you start training their pastors and counseling. What's going to happen if these people find out they're positive? How are you going to deal with this? How are you going to help them and walk side by side with them through this next journey of their life? So they go through this. Then word spreads throughout the village. On this day, you can come to this church and get screened for HIV. It will be free and it will be completely confidential. Now that's a big deal. Because when you do that government testing, do you know what often happens? You look at the result. Oh, Johnny's HIV positive? Johnny lives in my mother's village. I'm going to tell my mom. And they go and they tell their mom, and their mother tells somebody else, and somebody. So the whole village knows that Johnny's positive, and they all ostracize him. But you know what happens? Nobody else goes and gets tested from that village because they've seen the way that Johnny's been treated. This is what was going on. People weren't keeping their mouths shut. There was no good confidentiality with the government testing. So what happens here with the church, people will come in, they explain the test, the way it's going to work to everybody at once, and then they hand out numbers to people, and they go up one at a time, a little alcohol wipe of the finger, prick, drop of blood on the test, drop a buffer, and then they hand the cassette test, the little guy that's been passing around here, they hand it back to the individual, and they go in a separate room then to wait. They're the one that get the results. In that room, they usually either have a chalkboard or just a poster board that they've made up. One line, you don't have HIV. 2 lines, you do. There's a trash can to put your things. They're told in advance that if they're positive and they wish to talk to a pastor, there are people available to talk to them. If they want to learn where to go to get their medication, they know where to then send them for the government medication to be getting. What happens very often is people are overwhelmed. This is life-altering news. They leave. They don't want to tell anybody. They just don't, if you don't think about it for a while, it doesn't become real, But after a few months, when it begins to set in, they're thinking, I really do want to get the medicine. I want to start getting help. The church is still there. It's part of the community. It didn't go anywhere. So they can go back and then talk to the pastors later, even if it's taken a few months for them to build up that courage. So that's a great thing that they do, Life in Abundance Ministry. I know they're working in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Zambia, maybe even other countries by now, doing these HIV screenings. Now, sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes you just have people going on a short-term trip and they just want to help out and they do this. I used to work with a group of doctors from Vanderbilt Medical School. They would go over every year to Zambia and they would just set up these mobile units where they could screen people for HIV screening. And they tried to make it as confidential and private as they could, and they would do this. The difficulty, of course, is then it's here today and gone tomorrow, but it's better than nothing. It let people learn their status so they could choose to take action if they chose to. I love this gentleman. I have never met Simon, that's the gentleman on the right, but I want to meet him someday. He is a pastor at Glory Outreach Assembly Church in Uganda. He used to be a medical technologist. The head pastor, Ephraim, learned about what I'm doing with Science with a Mission. He wrote to me, he said, my church, even though they're in a very poor region of Uganda, they want to help out people in an even poorer region. They said, we try to go, once every few months and to just make one meal of rice so they get rice. Sometimes we're able to collect like some flip-flops or something to be able to give people if they don't have shoes so they have something to put on their feet. We'd love to be able to screen them for HIV or malaria and help them out that way. Simon, as a med tech in his past life, would be able to do that part. They're able to get the medicine. They know where to go to get the medicine if they're positive. So this is what we do. I used to be able to ship things to them. Every 6 months I would ship them more diagnostics. Recently we've had to stop because somebody started stealing the tests out of the post office. But this for many years worked well, that this church in a poor area would care and serve their fellow people in need. Orphanages. On the right-hand side in blue is Trevane. He started a really neat ministry. When you have a pile of people dying from AIDS, you're then left with a lot of orphans. One of the worst things that happens after one parent has died and one is still alive but HIV positive and knows that they will be dying, they're going to be leaving their kids and they have no idea what's going to happen to them. So he started a ministry where he has a home. They take in kids when there's only one parent left alive, but they know that they're nearing the end of their life. They have them come in. Here, they have a house mother, so they have somebody there caring for them. All their school fees are paid. They get help with their homework. They get their school uniforms paid for. They go home regularly to spend time with their parents, but the parents see and know that when they pass, these kids have a place where they can stay and a home where they have friends, people they consider their brothers and sisters, and a parent who's going to care for them. So it's a really nice, unique ministry that's going on here. And when you have parents that have died from AIDS, it's worthwhile to screen all the kids to see if there are any that are HIV positive. And so we sent over some diagnostics for them for free with an organization out of California, actually, He Intends Victory. They do a variety of different things all around HIV. But they went over and did the screenings for us. Cambodia, I have people that have purchased tests to screen people in prisons. Apparently they don't give them an option. They just screen everybody there. There's nothing, a lot of countries you'd have issues of privacy and things, but not an issue in Cambodia. They'll just dictate it, I suppose, that you do this. I don't want to mislead you. It's great. I love telling stories about the wonderful things that God is doing through this ministry. But I don't want to give you the impression that, gee, if you seek God's will and you find something that you think you're doing where you're following His will and you're using whatever you have learned here in service to Him in the future, that everything will go swimmingly. Because, man, that is not always the case. When I went to grad school, I did it fully intending to join some existing nonprofit, some nice big organization, World Relief, World International, something that was going to start using this new technology. It's just that I finished my degree and nobody was using it to help people in the developing world. I didn't want to start something myself. There's no money there. I kind of grew accustomed to food and shelter, you know. Okay, so I can do it myself. Okay, well, we want people to be able to donate to us. We want it to be tax deductible, so we're going to become a 501c3. So you go through a very lengthy process, fill that out, get it back, and we were rejected. Do you realize the NFL is a nonprofit in the US? But they rejected Science with a Mission that had no money? I mean, the NFL makes $9.5 billion a year. Really? We appealed that, and we did win the appeal. But it didn't go smoothly to begin with. We got our appeal hearing in August. We could, okay, you are now an official 501c3. You can begin, doing your fundraising. September 11th, 2001 then occurred. Do you want to know how unexcited people were about giving to things overseas at that point? I mean, I get it. We kind of just looked inward. We wanted to help Americans. We wanted to pull together. We were the ones that had been hurt. We wanted to have things that were helping the people in New York and in Pennsylvania and in DC. And then the economy went down. So even people that might want to give to you don't even have the money they used to have to give to the different charities they like. Oh, they're not going to start giving to a new one. So money was a big issue for quite a while. I got offered a chance to take a trip through some people with my denomination over to the Democratic Republic of Congo. I thought, this is great. Man, I can take a video camera. I'm going to bring diagnostics over there to help them out. I'm going to be able to talk to the medical doctors there, have them tell people how badly these things are needed. And if I videotape it, surely this will make fundraising easier in the future. Oh, good, I can't wait. And it took almost 3 years. This was a long process. We're waiting for things to calm down there, so we weren't going to get, in danger of being killed while over there, different little minor techniques. In the meantime, my yellow fever vaccine ran out. Now, yellow fever is something that you have to have a vaccine for to enter certain countries. They make sure it's, part of coming off that airplane. You can't get on unless you've got a yellow fever vaccine. And the yellow fever vaccine is good for 10 years. I've already had 2 of them at that point. But my time was running up, so I was going to need another one to get to go to the Congo. No problem. I go to the travel clinic I use, and I go in there, and I find out the yellow fever vaccine is a live virus vaccine. Now, you may think nothing of that, but I have multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disease. So the medicine I take suppresses my immune system. I can't take a live virus vaccine. I could get the actual disease. 3 years of planning and I'm now not going to get to go? Are you kidding me? So it ends up they have a brand new drug coming out for MS. I'm like, all right, it's a once a month IV infusion. So I talk with my MS doc. I'm like, all right, if I go off my meds right now, let it clear my system, get the yellow fever vaccine, go to Africa. When I come back, I start on this new drug because when I leave my drug, I can never go back on it. It's something that you can't go back on again. So I was like, but now we've got a new drug, so I can go on this new one. And we all decided this was an okay plan. This was going to be it. So I went off my drug, got the yellow fever vaccine, went over to Africa, and then got really sick. And it was the day before we were going to be going down to the hospital where I was going to be delivering all these tests and where I was going to get to videotape people. But there's only flights out of this region twice a week. And in conjunction with the missionaries that serve there, long-term career missionaries, they said, you know, we got to get you out of here. You got to go home. But I had so many good plans. They won't always go as you plan. It doesn't mean that it won't work out well in the end. But don't think that just because you're following God's will for your life that everything's going to go smoothly. In Paul's second letter to the church in Corinth, he calls God the God of all compassion. And there's a verse, chapter 1, verse 4, that I love. It says, God comforts you in all of your troubles. But it doesn't end there. It says he comforts you in all of your troubles so that you can comfort others. Yeah, that's it. 2 little words, but they mean a lot. So that. Because I don't think it means only with comfort. Guys, you have been gifted. God has given you gifts and abilities and passions and talents. You are blessed so that you can be a blessing to others. So please, pass the blessing on. A couple of stories to end up with people that get it, that know how to pass the blessing on. Elaine sent me an email. She wanted to order some tests. This was just this September. And she runs an organization called Rafiki. They run several orphanages in, I think, about 7 different African countries. And she was really sad. She said, look, we just had our first little boy in Ethiopia diagnosed with HIV. She said, they want me to bring over HIV tests so we can screen everybody in the orphanage. She said, you know, I'm leaving on the 16th. Is there any way you can get them to me on time? I'm in Massachusetts. She's in California. I'm like, we'll get them to you on time. And I also moved on, like, she was just so concerned for her kids, which I fully understand. I said, you know what? Usually we charge people, as I say, $1 per test plus the cost of shipping. We don't make money off it. We'd wait until UPS tells us what the cost is. We just charge them exactly what we got billed. I said, look, we're covering the cost. We're covering the cost of the tests and the shipping. Just get the test, get over there, and screen your kids. Well, she was overwhelmed with this blessing. She said, thank you so much. This is wonderful. She said, but you know what? I want you to be able to bless other people as well. I'm going to send you a donation. I mean, her bill was around $102 because I think the shipping was about $12. She sent us a check for $100. Elaine understands how to pass on the blessing. There are 2 people in my congregation that used to come and help do assembly work, Dawn and Joan, but they both have arthritis, and eventually it was just getting too hard to do the meticulous work and all, and so they stopped doing that, but they continue to tell people about Science with a Mission. 2 of the people that they told were Joan's sister, Jessie, and her husband, Al. And so when they came up from Maryland and were visiting, they went ahead and had them come to my house so they could see the very impressive assembly shed in my backyard and meet me. And these people thought it was a great organization and what we were doing. And from that point on, they started sending me checks every month, along with a little note, which I really liked. I now feel like I know these people, even though I met them only twice in my life. So they've been doing this for a couple of years now. And 2 months ago, Jessie died very suddenly. And Al decided instead of people bringing, flowers for the funeral and the wake, he asked people to make donations to Science with a Mission so things could be going on good with that. I thought, wow, this has happened a few different times. People will do this. They'll have gifts given in memory of somebody, and it's so humbling and just so overwhelming when this happens. I thought I want to do something very special with this money. And I thought they care so much about evangelism. Accept Christ or reject him, but man, we got to let people hear the story. They got to hear that God loves them. said, so I've got to wait until there's something good with it. And of course, the very next day, I get a request from Christy. She's going to be traveling to Indonesia, and she works with Wycliffe Bible translators. I'm like, yes, this is it. I said, Christy, we're going to get you all your diagnostics, and we're going to do it for free. We're going to pay for the shipping, pay for the diagnostics. And I told her about Jesse and told her about this. And she said, this is wonderful. Thank you so much for blessing us this way. She said, actually, I'm just going there for a meeting. I don't work down there, but it's going to be David that's going to get these tests. So David wrote to me. He was, wow, you're doing this for free for us? This is great. Please thank Al and the rest of the family, the people who donated. I'm in charge of this entire region of Indonesia with all the Wycliffe Bible translators. And so he said, when the rainy season comes, malaria is very prevalent, but we can't find any place to go to get diagnosed. This is going to be a wonderful blessing to us. So from Joan and Dawn to Jesse and Al to Christy to David to all the Wycliffe Bible translators, everybody knows how to pass on a blessing. I like Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. Even as a kid, when normal kids liked Christmas, I liked Thanksgiving. Nowadays, I have an older brother, younger sister. We all live in Massachusetts along with our mom. And so we go to each other's houses at different holidays and things like that. My brother gets Christmas. I have Thanksgiving. I like it when we invite a pile of people. I like it when my sister will take the international students from her school and bring them down. I like it when I take people from my church that have nowhere else to go and bring them down. I have what would be considered by US standards a small house, 860 square feet. But we can get 3 tables and just, pile people in, and it's great. Easter is the exact opposite. Easter is when my siblings go to their in-laws, and it's usually just me and my mom. And we can be pretty untraditional. I just tell my mom we'll do whatever she wants, and there are times she's like, I'd like pizza. So we have pizza on Easter. Well, 2 years ago, she had decided she had enough of doing really bizarre, different things. She's like, I really just want a traditional ham dinner, mashed potatoes, ham, things. I'm like, all right, but if I'm going to that effort of making this food, I'm inviting more people to come. It just happened that we started to have some college kids coming to our church. It's not the norm. We don't have any colleges real nearby, but we had some people who were making the drive up from where the school was. So I invited them. I said, hey, if you don't live nearby and you're not going to get able to go home for the holidays, I said, come on up and join us for Thanksgiving. And so they came. So we did it again last year. It just kind of got a little out of hand. I said, hey, if there's anybody else you'd like to invite. It was great. And it all happened within like 2 days before Easter. I'm like, look, I promise you there'll be enough food. Might not be chairs for everybody, but there'll be enough food. Come on down. So we had a pile of people. The vast majority of people at my house I had never seen before in my life. It was a wonderful time. One of the women was Kate. She is a French high school teacher. And she said, oh, I really enjoy doing this and all. So later on, she sent me a donation for Science with a Mission. And she said, look, I have a real heart for the French-speaking countries in Africa. Is there any way you could make sure that this money gets used to help one of those countries? Sure, absolutely. I don't know how long that's going to take. Of course, the very next day, I get an email from Alyssa, who serves in Madagascar, a French-speaking country in Africa. She runs the Sorority Maternity Center. And so I told her, you know what? There's this woman, Kate, that I had Easter dinner with, and she's going to cover the cost of your diagnostics. These people get it, passing the blessing on to others. God blessed you for a reason. When you look at the developing world and all the needs that there are out there, and there's a lot of them, these diagnostics, it's tiny. It's a tiny little thing that we're doing. But God can use it in mighty ways. With this, He's been able to change lives. Do you realize that in Honduras, if you've been known to be a prostitute, you're not allowed to get another job? I don't know how you can dictate that, but they do. You're not allowed to unless you go through and you get screened for different sexually transmitted diseases, chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, and you're shown to have a clean bill of health. Then you can get a job in a factory. It's expensive to do this, so they're stuck in the life. Well, there's an organization that goes down there, they buy our diagnostics, go down and screen these women for free so that then they can get a job in a factory and get out of a life of prostitution. God is able to use Science with a Mission now to save lives. One example being what we talked about with screening pregnant women for HIV so their kids are born without the virus, a chance at a full life, healthy life. To date, I think we're around 318,000 tests in 70 different countries around the world. So the only question that remains, how are you going to let God use you and your science to impact the poorest places of His world? Thanks.
So my question was, how did you, or where do you get the scientists to actually create these tests? I mean, they're fascinating. I love how small and easy they are to use, but do you have like a team of scientists that help put this together, or was it inspired solely by your knowledge and learning that you got in school?
Right now, that whole initial manufacturing stage is done by the company Azog down in New Jersey. I don't know how many people work in that, but it's a fairly small company. After that, the volunteers are all folks from my church and my brother's church, or people that when I've spoken somewhere and somebody lives nearby and they want to come over and help out. Initially, a lot of the research I was doing at both Salem State University, which is where my sister and her husband teach, and on occasion at Gordon College, where I did my undergraduate work. And some of the students from there would be helping out with various research projects and things that we're working on at first. How do we make antibodies, for malaria? How do we make hepatitis B antibodies? So there's been different people that have come at different times. They're not full-time working on this, but they've done projects for us at different times.
That's amazing. And just another question I had for you. Where have you found the most success in being able to spread the word about these tests? And how can people like us, maybe at a university, help spread the word for you?
Two different things were really helpful to me as far as getting the word out. The first was that conference I mentioned, the Global Mission Health Conference. It was just the most appropriate in terms of gathering together people doing mission work and specifically doing health work in their mission work. The other thing happened in 2010 when the earthquake hit Haiti. I had already had a few different people purchase kits from us for use in Haiti. And after the earthquake, when so much of the infrastructure was destroyed, several of them took it upon themselves to spread the word that, hey, I know where you can get diagnostics that don't need electricity. I now work with more than 47 different organizations just in the country of Haiti. So Tim Randolph, who was probably the most responsible, the guy that just told me he took it on as his mission after the earthquake to tell people, if you're serving in Haiti, get your diagnostics from Science with a Mission.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. My name's Catherine, School of Nursing here. Couple of things. Why do you think someone would be stealing those tests from the post office? What has your conclusion been?
That's actually an extremely common thing to happen, even in Europe. I dated a man from Spain for 3 years, and he told me, never, ever, ever mail me anything. It's a job that's so sought after that you have to have an in with somebody to get appointed to a position in the post office. They see a package that looks interesting, they open it up, and they take something home. It doesn't matter if they even know what it is yet. If they think they might be able to sell it, they'll take it. So we've had that problem a lot with trying to get things over to Africa. The vast majority of our tests we ship to somebody in the US who's traveling overseas and will take it with them. These folks at Glory Outreach Assembly Church do not know anybody else in the US. That's why I was shipping to them. And I actually was shocked the first few times when it worked so well. So it wasn't a surprise when then suddenly they were missing.
The next question was the title of this presentation. So, do missionaries wear lab coats? So my question, you answered it with the science with the Christian compassion. That all ties in. But the other thought I had was, is there any issue with actually servant leaders wearing lab coats, and whether or not that's a turnoff to those that you would serve? A thought. Wearing a uniform, if that's looked at as a good thing or a deterrent.
Interesting. I've never had an issue with anybody that I'm aware of, having a problem with wearing a lab coat. Most of people, I think, will see a lab coat and think medical doctor. And so that's usually not a bad thing for people to be thinking when they see it. So I haven't had any problem or any issue with that.
Okay, that's really a great answer. Thank you so much.
The question is whether or not there are other tests that we're thinking of developing. And the answer for right now is no. What had happened is I used to have missionaries that would come up to me and they would lobby for what my next disease would be. And really, sleeping sickness in Africa was going to be the next one because you need a microscope. And they said, look, we only own 2. So when you have a nurse on a bicycle riding out to a village to try and screen people for sleeping sickness, man, if something happens to that microscope, we're really going to be hurting. So could you do something? If we could get a rapid test. Well, in order to develop an immunoassay of this style, this format, you need to have a disease marker. There's been nothing that's known yet that is a disease marker in the blood, serum, urine, anything for sleeping sickness. So I was partnering with a retired professor from the University of Maryland who was going to be hopefully getting diseased blood and then screening it for this disease marker. The unfortunate thing was once he retired, he didn't have the same access to the university equipment that he thought he was going to have, as well as he ended up with not nearly as much time on his hands as he thought he would have. So I was waiting for that first step for me then to take over with then developing the assay. But in reality, I spent a tremendous amount of time making these kits and getting them out. So the idea of getting more diseases now, it's not something that we're working on at the moment. Might be nice to have happen in the future, but right now it's just those 9 that we have.
Let's thank our speaker one more time.
Thank you, guys.